Justice is coming. Loved your interview yesterday where you talked about Supreme Court justices. Thorough breakdown. I have observed how progressives are not talking about their preference of Supreme Court justices to counter the powerful narrative from people like Clyburn. Why do you think so?
It's the same thing I've been railing against for years, that the progressives, the left, broadly speaking, just doesn't acknowledge or aware of the importance of the courts in our system. I mean, to a certain extent, like, I don't know why. I mean, I honestly don't know why that's the case. I mean, I was going to say that, folks who identify as socialists or as communists or revolutionaries on some level don't want to engage in the existing institutions, which I can understand on some level from the theoretical and philosophical level. But the reality is, and maybe it's also just like, at one point you get old and you realize, like, well, you know what? Maybe I can't necessarily count on the revolution coming in 4 or 5 years. So to hedge my bets, I may have to deal with the Supreme Court justice, one of 5 or 6 people who is going to be on the court for 30 years and has the ability to essentially outlaw any type of structural change that we may want. And we are headed into an era, and if you've been listening to this program for any period of time, we've been saying this on this show for at least 6, 7, 8 years. We're heading into a period where we're going to have a court. And if you want the closest analogy to what that court is like, go back to the 1920s. Go back to the 1930s, when court is reluctant to allow minimum wage, 40-hour work week, child labor laws. These were all things that the court at one point or another said, no, this is an infringement on the freedom of contract. And also that same court allowed for Jim Crow laws, allowed for the disenfranchisement of black voters. And we're headed into it. And I don't know why people don't, why, that message doesn't come across to the left. I mean, I think, partly it's it's an incredibly undemocratic institution. And so, but it's still real. It's real.
I think also part of it is the right wing. They see somebody like Kavanaugh get in or whatever, and they're like, that somebody that represents me. Communists and leftists aren't going to get that. The best
Never.
Is like you're going to get a good liberal on that. But I like, this was a problem even 20 years ago, 30 years ago. Every Supreme Court justice who has been appointed to the court, at least in the past 30 years. Maybe this changed actually with Kagan and Kennedy, I guess. Not Kennedy. Maybe there was one appointment that it's arguable. But every appointment has moved the court to the right. Even the so-called liberal ones are replacing in that seat someone who is to their left. And that is a problem.
Yeah.
I mean,
well, there's the right caught on to this a long time ago, and the Democrats are only just beginning to understand.
Abortion allowed for them to really, I mean, look, the corporate interests know the relevance of the Supreme Court. And know the relevance of even like the D.C. Circuit Court, which deals with a lot of administrative law. And they have platoons of lawyers who go in, and when they want to like eviscerate Dodd-Frank, they have multiple waves of evisceration. They try to eviscerate it on a legislative level. which in fact got you Dodd-Frank, as opposed to Dodd-Frank was attempting to be more surgical in the way that it dealt with our banking system, as opposed to just simply taking a meat cleaver and saying, we're going back to Glass-Steagall days where we disconnect commercial banks from investment banks. Dodd-Frank was like more surgical in this. And then once it gets to be more surgical, where you like have this law and that law and this regulation, that regulation, then the lawyers take over. And as it gets to be, as the regulatory agencies attempt to execute this, the lawyers come in and they either tie up the regulatory agency for years and years and years, because the expenditure is worth it for these banks and whatnot, or it's not mutually exclusive, they attempt to get a majority on a court like the D.C. Circuit Court. In fact, Republicans were not only, and this is why the filibuster got removed, preventing Obama from putting people on that court until Harry Reid got rid of the filibuster for that level of federal judiciary spots. They were trying to permanently diminish the number of members on that court so that they could maintain a majority, because that was the court that would, on a really the second most powerful court in the country, would deal with a lot of the questions like, does the SEC have the right to regulate this part of banking? Does the EPA have the right to determine whether this chemical is dangerous to people? And when they failed at that, they, while also simultaneously going at the Supreme Court. So there's no... It really is a failure. And I will say this, that there was a concerted effort by some people. We had a couple of those people on. Brian Fallon, for one, a guy came from the Obama administration and recognized their failure at focusing on the courts, who have been trying to push Biden. And Biden has, I'm not content with what he has done, but by any reasonable measure has done a better job than we've had in any of the Democratic presidents prior to this, in terms of appointing people to the federal judiciary, in terms of having a diversity of people. There's still really horrible judges that he's putting on there. Childs could be one. I don't know how horrible Childs is, but certainly not the best of the picks that he has. But there's a woman who represented Chevron, who Trump nominated, that Biden seems to be re-entering her nomination. But there's also a lot more public defenders and a lot of other type of judges that are getting appointed to the federal judiciary. So that's that. You want to read another IM?